First of all, when it comes to resume, I would like to jump to 1 second. I think I added some new slides today. Oh, my bad. I'll come back. Let's start from here first. Data engineering resumes, okay? Whenever you write your resume, as I said, this is your first priority because you never know when opportunity is going to pop up, right? Having a good structure is important. So there are usually two different styles. Some people prefer a role-oriented like template, and some people would prefer to have like two columns, right? I think either would work. Most of the ATS tools will be able to parse these easily, but you have to decide what type of template you're going to go with, and then the structure. The layout, of course, is your personal preference, but the structure, the way you structure and how you display these information is more important. Okay, but typically you need to have your of course, you always need to have your contact information. I would recommend putting the key skills on the top, so right away people can see the skills, because when it comes to data engineering, resume screening, right? Companies are probably very picky about the skills you have because, as I said, like you can work as analytics engineer, but if this company focuses on like Apache Spark and Delta Lake and stuff, they don't care about DBT. That's the challenging part of data engineering job search. It's like there are different types of company that use completely different set of technologies, and that's why, like in a program, you have to learn so many different things, right? So having the right skills in a very obvious place is important. So because I found myself like when I screen resumes, I tend to just, instead of the experience, because I know experience will take time to read and I have to really read it to understand what you did. But skills are just much more straightforward. Like, do you have Spark skills? Do you have cloud experience, right? So I think key skills are still very important. Put it on the top. Education, always put it at the bottom, right? Because people know where to find it, basically. So you don't have to really highlight. I see a lot of people put education on the top. I think it may work for if you're looking for business related jobs, like if you have like a business school degree, MBA, it may work. But for data engineering, most of the things you learn are not in school. So people care more about skills, right? And then you put experience. So skills, experience, and then of course you need to highlight your project experience. So this is where the portfolio project go, and experience, right? But if you're a career switcher, where your work experience like unrelated to data and IT, then putting experience on the top may actually hurt you, because right away people will say, okay, you don't have the relevant experience. And most employers prefer to work with someone or hire someone who has the experience. So in that case, you probably need to blend your project experience, into experience. So the experience here doesn't have to be work experience. If you put work experience, then you have to put your work experience, right? So I would recommend just putting down like experience or related experience, right? And then you can put your project experience on the top, and followed by some other experiences you have. If you come from IT development, then you have a lot of similar skills. You need to highlight those experience. And and exactly what you need to put down under experience, I think you need to discuss with your mentor, because this is case by case. Okay. Now, what do we need to put in these boxes? First of all, I think for contact information, you definitely need to have your LinkedIn profiling, and if you have GitHub and Medium blog post, you need to put them here. We've done some sort of small experimentation. About 10% of the time, companies will click on it, or the employers. So this is so you can put a tracking code, right? You can use the Google short URL, or you can use bit.ly link, so you can tell like how many times people actually clicked on it, right? It's about 10%, I think, 10% of the time. And then you put key skills. my recommendation for key skills is that you need to make it as easy, right, as possible for whoever who's reading a resume. I've seen people just putting, a lot of keywords side by side, right? And then they have like so many they have so many keywords, but it's very hard to read. And I've seen people like putting like 30 to 40 different keywords on the resume, and that's not recommended, because it feels like you know everything. And I remember when I was talking to one of the hiring manager, the manager said, well, your student knows more than I do, right? But it's not really, they're not really praising our students. He's like just questioning that. He said like, but do you really have the experience, or you're just putting keywords there, right? So first of all, I would recommend creating different sections, right? You can show, you can, programming or coding, and then maybe some experience about cloud, ETL, ELT, or big data. However you want to do it, but add the keywords right after that. Just make it easy for the reader. Okay, and whatever keyword you mention, okay, make sure that this is not the only time you're going to show this keyword. Okay, so later in your relevant experience section, if you mention these keywords in the key skills, I want to see them multiple times in whatever projects you've done or whatever experience you have. And that's more convincing. That's the feedback I got from multiple hiring managers, because they said, well, because nowadays anyone can put keywords on the resume. It's super easy, but it's not that easy for people to put all of these keywords in their experience, because you actually have worked on those. So I think your advantage is that whatever keywords you put, in the key skills section, you probably have worked on it, like in your capstone projects or whatever new projects you will be working on. So you can repeat these keywords. And those automated systems, they also do word count, right? So if the company is looking for Delta Lake or, Upsert or whatever those keywords are, they will want to see that multiple times. They will want to see Spark multiple times, right? So make sure that you don't just mention that once and then it feels like you're not very experienced, right? Because you haven't implemented anything. For the related experience, of course, you can go by like different companies that you have worked for. I would highly recommend. I've seen a lot of technical resumes, and I found that engineers tend to just list facts, like this is what I did. I used this tool and I apply that to, certain problems, right? And I think the right way to do that is, again, everything you do here, you're the salesperson for yourself. You're selling your skills or your potential to the company, right? So you have to think about this from the hiring manager's perspective and make it easy for them to understand what you actually did. Sometimes when I help the students who worked on some sort of real client projects, when I read the project, even though I got those projects for the students, I still don't understand what the student did, because it was very technical and I was not involved in the project. I understand at a high level what the project is about, but I didn't really, involve in those projects. And then when the students said what they did, A, B, and C, I get lost because I don't really understand, like, what problem were you trying to solve for the client, right? What was the objective? And you need to communicate that first so people understand what you actually did. And even just one line, it helps people understand, oh, this is what you did. It's a warehouse project for whatever, for whatever purpose, right? And then they sort of, based on their experience, they know what to expect. Okay, if it's a warehouse project, I sort of understand what you're going to do, right? Or you built some sort of end-to-end data ingestion pipeline, right? But it's important to describe, it this way to help companies understand the objective, right? And then you can talk about the implementation, what you actually did, right? Because if you think about the real life interview questions, when they look at your resume, they start asking you questions, right? Tell me about your experience working for this company. What did you do, right? How big is the team? And what is your contribution to this project? Which part did you work on, right? And then when you say, okay, I worked on this data ingestion, I worked with Fivetran, Airbyte, I write some custom connectors, and then they will dig deeper and ask you more questions about that, right? So again, communicate the objective first. What's the goal, right? Because when you talk about the goal, in the end, you can explain it, you can tell people the impact, right? The impact doesn't really have to be like, I helped the company save millions of dollars. If you have that, that's great. But data engineering, a lot of times, it's actually just optimization. You help the data scientist optimize the Spark code. And the Spark job used to take 5 hours, and now it's like 20 minutes. That's a huge improvement. And that means cost saving, more automation, right? Faster, right? So I think you should always put automation, right? Whether it's a cron job or it's airflow, automation always make the company become more productive and more efficient, right? So automation could be one of the impact, right? And so are you optimizing code, right? Or it could be like, this is the first automated data pipeline or something like that. Sometimes it's hard to quantify, but I told the student in a BI program, right? You're building a dashboard. It doesn't sound very fancy because anyone can build a dashboard nowadays, but you tell them that this is the very first dashboard, right? We built for this startup, right? So the impact is really big, because to build the first dashboard, you're probably working with the founder and co-founder of the small company, but then I understand that you actually interact with people a lot. Whoever who have built this before, they know, like the founders and co-founders will have all kinds of questions, and you're working with real people now, and you're helping them solve their challenges. That's the kind of real life experience people need. It doesn't really always have to be like, oh, I implemented like a Delta Lake. Only big companies need that. That skill is very useful. It's in demand. But when you talk about your own project, even it's a small project, you want to highlight the impact. And the follow-up question from you guys might be, okay, but I didn't work on a real client project. I did my portfolio project. You should still talk about the impact, because you will say like, it could have this impact if it gets deployed. But of course, you don't have to say it this way, but you need to tell people like, this kind of automation, it can help companies save cost, right? Improve efficiency or whatever. And that's why it's always important to put whatever project you've done in the business context. Even for data engineers, they need to understand the business context, right? Okay, that's why I recommend you guys to read, for example, the data models of Salesforce, of MailChimp, HubSpot, and try to read some blog posts to understand like the data sources, because all of these are business context, right? Okay, and you definitely need to mention the skills you applied. So whatever keywords you mentioned, you're gonna put, you're gonna have them here. And sometimes I've seen students doing something like, let's say I worked for company A and let's say let's say I worked for company A, and then there are a bunch of bullet points, right? Let's say 3 bullet points, and the student will add one more line saying that, okay, tools used. And this sort of gives you the opportunity to mention, Spark multiple times. You worked with Spark AWS, Lambda function, and, and the students told me that this was actually very useful. Yeah, a bunch of students told me about this. So then I trust them. So I recommend this to you. Okay. I think it makes sense to me. And it was sort of just, you have all of these skills, right? Have all of these skills, but he applied some of these skills for this project. So I think it makes sense. And you're also repeating these keywords, which is important. Okay. The word count matters. So that's the experience. And of course, for the projects, you can call it something like side project, end-to-end projects. And again, explain motivation, why you work on that project. And I know it's not real project. You can't say, oh, I did it for this company, but think about how people are going to ask you questions in real interview. They will always ask you, why do you work on this project? You know, it could be like you're super interested in learning a new tool, a new skill, and that's why you invest money, right? I think as a data engineer, you always need to keep learning upskilling yourself and learning new things. You need to stay curious, and the employers don't expect you to know everything, but you sort of need to have that learning aptitude, so they know you'll figure things out, right? And you have really good problem solving skills. And when you say that I'm really passionate about data engineering, and that's why I'm switching career, then you have to prove that, right? You can tell people, well, I did a data engineering boot camp to upskill myself. I worked on a bunch of portfolio projects. But it will be better just to tell people that I really like this technology. I heard a lot about this, let's say DBT or analytics engineering, and that's why I'm spending my own time learning the new skills, and I'm implementing a project. And I think that will sound very, very good from an employer's perspective. Instead of telling them, oh, this is a school project, right? Or this is a portfolio project. I would avoid mentioning portfolio project because it sounds like, okay, you do this because you do this for job search, right? I'd rather leave the impression that I'm genuinely interested in data engineering. And that's why, I'm curious. I heard about this new technology and I'm learning it myself, and I'm also doing it. It sounds very different from a portfolio project, because people know that if you want to get a job, you have to work on portfolio projects. So there's a little bit difference there, right? I hope you agree with me. But a very frequently asked question is that, why do you use this data set? Why do you work on this project? And then the follow-up question will be, well, why do you choose this architecture? Why do you use a serverless function instead of using EC2 instance, right? And you sort of need to be able to back yourself up, okay? There's no right or wrong answer, as I said. You just need to be able to say, in this scenario, I think, Lambda makes more sense. Even if you're wrong, it wouldn't matter that much. They can debate with you, but you need to be able to defend yourself instead of just agree with what they say, okay? That's my recommendation here. Oh, and also, you have one link here, right? But I think people are less likely to click on this link. But if you have a GitHub link next to each project you've done, I think people are more likely to click on these links. So if you have GitHub, you have Medium blog post, you have a LinkedIn post about the project, I think that will be helpful, okay? So that's the resume. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is related to the relevant experience. So what of someone like me that doesn't really have any relevant experience related to data engineering? So how do I handle that situation?
Yeah. I think at this point, you should not call yourself not having any related experience, because you've implemented 2 projects in this program, right? So in your case, it is a little bit tricky, because if you put work experience and company in A and B, I know it's not related to data engineering at all. So in this case, you sort of need to move your data engineering project to the top, and just put that under experience or related experience. And you have to sort of explain the project in a very professional way. It sounds like you have real experience. It is real experience. It's just like not for a company, right? But when you actually join a team, it's probably just what you're going to do anyways. It might be very similar, but you're doing this at a larger scale, you're working with a team. But still, this is very useful experience. I think one of the advantages of doing this is that some of the skills you guys have, right? There are less people out there who know these new technologies. And so this is still going to give you some advantage. compared to data science. And it's kind of hard to convince employers nowadays with just a portfolio project, because any courses you take online, you're going to have some sort of exercises and projects, and people can do Kaggle. But even on Kaggle, for each competition, you may find like 50 to 100 different notebooks that people share among themselves, and you can just like download a notebook and just claim it, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually do something end to end. For data engineering, that's why I highly recommend everyone, like for every project you do, you need to make that whatever data architecture diagram, make it look very professional. Use, draw.io. I think that's what your instructor prefer. But you can use some other tools, but just make it look really nice, and write, a summary about the motivation of the project. I think people will appreciate that. If you don't have directly a related experience, then you have to put down more projects. But you don't have to put 6, 7 projects. But I would say 3 to 4 projects will be necessary, and they cannot be repeating. It needs to be like projects covering different skills. So you need to add some DBT stuff, right? Some data warehouse related, and you have this CDC, Hoodie, Delta Lake related project. I think all of these will add up. And that's probably not enough. Then you have to start doing blogging and just write about your experience on the project you've worked on. In previous cohorts, we have students who actually, I know you guys may have done some presentation, but we have students who just recorded on his own the project he has done. It's like my project walkthrough. Combine that with your architecture diagram, and you put the YouTube link here. I think it will be very helpful, because people are actually seeing the presentation. They sort of have a glance of what you've implemented. If you can explain that very well, that will be convincing, to be honest. So it's just like some extra effort and preparation you need to do. Only listing the project, I don't think it's going to help you that much. You need to sort of make it look nice, and to make sure that you look more experienced. Okay, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you so much. But I have a follow-up question. So what would be the title? Like if I'm moving the project to the relevant experience section, am I still going to call it project, or because I heard you saying latest experience? I'm not really sure. What do I title it?
You can just call that experience. So for example, you have the skills section, and then you have experience, right? And then you can list the projects you've done, right?
Okay.
So let's say end-to-end, whatever, data ingestion, pipeline, right? So that's the title, and then you explain, what you did, right? A, B, and C, okay? And you list the tools you used, and combine that with your GitHub, YouTube presentation, right? And then you move on to the second project, project 2. But just don't call that like, side project. That's what I would recommend. Yeah.
Okay.
Trust me, this is still a very good, like the timing is good, because the market doesn't have a lot of people who have this kind of skills. So a lot of times hiring data engineers is still skill-based, right? And people can tell your experience based on the project description. But I think in a few years, down the road, there might be more data engineers out there, then the requirement for experience will be higher. So that's what we're seeing in data science. Students in our real client project, it's very easy for them to get interviews because they just have the real experience on the resume. But students in a part-time program who don't work on real projects, and it's a little bit harder for them to get noticed unless your past experience is somehow still related to data and analytics, right? It's not that you cannot get a job. It's just you need to put in more effort. But definitely we're here to help you, and you can work with the mentors, and the projects you choose is also important, I think. So come talk to us. We'll give you some suggestions. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, I think data engineering is very practical. My understanding of, like, for example, you may not be noticed or preferred by a big company at the very beginning, but think about like company at WeCloudData scale, like it's smaller company, and but we have data ingestion needs, right? And if you implement, let's say, Airbyte, Fivetran, use the free trial to build something. Honestly, it's exactly the same. Like how we do that internally there's not much difference, right? So whatever experience you have built, like building your own solutions, it will be very close to the real life solutions. But of course, whenever you upload your code to GitHub, make sure it looks nice, right? It's professional. But I would count those as experience. But you can't just like come to an interview and say, oh, this is what I did. This is the tool I used. You need to understand the context. And again, it's back to reading blog posts and those white paper is really going to help you. Because the worst thing is like you did something really great. You follow the instruction by Edwin and you implemented a pretty complex project. But when people ask you, questions, if you can't answer those questions very well, then right away they can tell you're not very experienced. So yeah, even just reading those Reddit comments will be helpful, I think. Just hear from different people, how they argue about things and how they describe their own experience working with these different kind of tools is going to help you in your interviews, to be honest. Okay. Any other questions?
One question I have is, how would you label or where would you put our bootcamp experience on a resume? Is it something you feel would go under education? Is it more about things that we would list in terms of projects, like the projects we did? How would that kind of be listed?
Oh, I'll just put that under education, but
Education.
probably put that on the top. So because there are not many data engineering boot camps out there, so I think it'll be useful. But whatever projects you did in the boot camp, try to make it sound like don't try to leave the impression that you did that in school. You should always tell people that this is some kind of project I implemented on the side because I'm interested in it, or as I go through my learning journey, I implement these projects. That's probably better. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to actually go back because there's some other details. Okay. So this diagram here, the title was data science resume, but it's the same because this is a big data project. Okay. Again, coming back to the context, if you're having an interview with a bank, right? This is bank use case. Maybe what you did was here, you did some ETL, you implemented a data model for a data warehouse, right? Try to understand how things work end to end, right? So before you go for an interview at a bank, okay? Any companies, any industries, you absolutely need to know, do your research. Okay, what kind of data, right? Does this industry or does the companies in this kind of industry work with or collect? You can't get a data engineer job without knowing this, okay? I'm pretty sure like you can do the research and find some answers, right? ATM, right? When people deposit money, in Visa, which is the credit card transactions, right? Loans, mortgages, investment, wealth management, and do your research. Try to understand the different type of business units in a bank, right? And try to understand what kind of data they collect. I'm pretty sure we'll figure out by asking ChatGPT maybe, right? And they're also a standard, kind of set of data that every company will need. If they have a website, they want to attract more people, so they want to implement Google or web analytics, which means Google Analytics is the data you want to collect, right? Insurance companies might be monitoring your location. If you download their applications, or there might be location data, there'll be social media data, right? Some of these data will be collected in a very traditional way through ETL, right? So you have like the CRM systems, transaction systems, you have accounting and legal. So data will basically need to be ingested, transformed, and loaded into warehouse, right? And then companies might build data marts, right? So a smaller version of your data warehouse used for marketing, used by the marketing team, by the risk team, by the compliance team, right? And then data scientists come in, right? They will be doing machine learning, predictive modeling. The data engineer actually spend a lot of effort just getting these data prepared for them, right? And then data analytics happen. They're going to do marketing campaigns. And after the marketing campaigns, right? So for example, if WeCloudData send out an email to all alumni and say, hey, we have this promotion going on, now that you have completed the data engineering program, would you consider doing a machine learning program, right? And you're going to enjoy your alumni discount. Well, that is a marketing campaign, right? And after we do the marketing campaign, and oh, sorry, guys. Can we take a break? I have an urgent call I have to pick up. Just give me 5 minutes. I noticed that we haven't taken any break, and we'll continue at 8:15. Okay, and we'll complete this. Sorry about that. Hey guys, I'm back. Let me know if we can continue. Shall we continue?
Yep, I'm ready to go.
Okay, cool. Right. So I think we talked about the traditional approach of building a warehouse, right? So data gets ingested into the relational databases, or you have different kind of structured data, or sometimes it could be unstructured data like legal documents. But that means you need a separate process to digitize these documents. But eventually through the ETL process, we load them into a data warehouse, and then we build the data marts, right? The difference between the data marts and data warehouse is that the data marts is more business unit focused, right? And you can do some further ETL, right? But when you move data from the data warehouse to the data mart, this is a very traditional way of doing ETL, because if you do ELT, it's going to look quite different. And then we prepare all the advanced analytics and insights. If company do the marketing campaign, they're going to execute on the campaign, send out emails, right? They're going to make phone calls and send people some sort of you can do advertisement as well. But it's important to collect the feedback data, right? So again, by working with different kind of connectors, right, or APIs, we are going to ingest the data back into the data sources, or sometimes the data can be directly ingested into the warehouse, and that sort of close the loop, right? That's the traditional data warehouse approach, and a lot of big companies still build it this way. But if we add big data and data lake, right, that means we need to set up CDC and ingest the data right into Kafka or Kinesis, and the data will come to a data lake. It could be Amazon S3, it could be Hadoop, and then we use Apache Spark to process the data. And maybe because the data is really big, the machine learning process can be moved into the Spark pipeline. So we use Spark ML to build the machine learning, and you can deploy the model and do the streaming analysis as well using Spark streaming, right? But for example, when we built the data warehouse, the data well needs to be sort of analyzed by the data science team and data analytics team, right? And that creates the insights and whatever machine learning models. If we use Spark and we do real-time analysis, data will, because Spark streaming doesn't really store data. It's not a database. So we need to write the data to somewhere. And it can write the data into a NoSQL database, right? And you can write that to Elasticsearch database as well. So there's the destination you have. But if you're sending data back to, let's say, the data sources, that becomes like the reverse ETL. And you may want to work with tools like HighTouch, but I think it's actually quite expensive to use HighTouch. We sort of made a they provided a quote to us, but at our scale, because we're already working with a lot of tools and SaaS software, I feel like it's just a little bit expensive for us. So we decided to just write our own API to ingest it, to do the reverse ETL instead of working with HighTouch. But companies like, for example, Shopify, they use Spark streaming a lot. And one of the use cases they presented at a conference was that they use Spark streaming to do like fraud detection. Or maybe by analyzing the description of the products people sell, and they're able to detect like fake products or fake goods, right? But then they need to sort of send this data to the operations center. So the operations center might be running some sort of databases, right? Or they have some sort of API. So the Spark streaming job will actually need to be calling those APIs or be sending data directly to some sort of destination, the database in the destination. So, and then they can take, react to those, alerts, right? Yeah, so that's a use case. So I think when you write your resume, it's important to show people that you have worked on something that's close to this. I know there's no real life scenario in this case, but definitely try to create a more professional looking. This is just for me to do the presentation, but you should create a more professional looking diagram that sort of explains the data flow. It's important, and always include the data source. Ideally, it's not just a CSV file you're working with. You always connect to some sort of data source, or you're scraping data yourself. If you're doing data scraping, that probably means you need to set up the infrastructure. You run that in the cloud, maybe on an EC2 instance, or you use Lambda function. So I think all of these will add value to your portfolio, and that's what I would recommend. Okay. That's the resume part. I think we covered the resume, and here's some examples. This is a data science resume, but I think it's the idea is the same. So this is a 2-column style, right? So the student listed the technical skills, and she sort of broke it down by programming, machine learning, statistics, visualization, and Spark. She has a PhD, so she actually got a job pretty quickly, and I think her education background definitely helped her. She had some real project experience, so she added that to the resume. Right? So she described the project she did, and prior to that, I think the only experience she had was the research assistant and teaching assistant experience, which is not very helpful, but it's still related to data analytics and statistics. And then she had the portfolio project. So she did some portfolio projects. She calls that the data science projects and 2 project. And you need to mention some of these keywords. So yeah. This is a quite effective resume, and this is another one. The feedback I got from the hiring manager on this resume is that, well, you don't need logos, right? Don't put images on the resume. It doesn't look very professional. But the style is kind of similar to the previous one. The skill set on the left-hand side, and then project experience. This is a career switcher. As you can see, the previous experience was process engineering. And that was not directly related to data science or data engineering. I would even just remove 3 more bullet points, maybe just keep 2 bullet points. I think the Excel VBA is still relevant, so it's okay to keep that, I think. But as you can see, this student had 2 job titles for the same company, but because those are not related to data, so I would probably just remove this. And you can just say from 2016 to 2018, you worked in a junior process engineer role, or well, some people would like to show the progression, but it doesn't matter here because it's not a data science or data engineer job. So you should definitely expand on this, right? So your experience should be like this, and then your past work experience, try to minimize that if it's not directly related to data. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Do you think it ever makes, sorry to jump in. Do you ever think it makes sense to omit like past jobs? Like one thing I'm always worried about is if someone asks me if there's a gap in my resume or why there's a gap, and maybe it's because I excluded like a job that wasn't related to what I was searching for. Like, would you recommend like just cutting those old jobs down to just like 1 line, or is it better to just omit them if they're really not directly related?
That's what I would recommend. I think that's nothing to be worried about. If people notice that, they will ask you questions. And I think writing resume is all about presenting useful information, and it saves the hiring manager time. And you also want to express, your relevant skills. So I think there's nothing wrong with that. You're omitting things, but you didn't really lie about anything. You're really just choosing the right information to present, because indeed you're applying for a data engineering job. Why would you listing that are not relevant, and that's not at your advantage. So nothing wrong with that. It's totally okay. People, like when you actually start talking with the hiring manager, they will definitely ask you this kind of question, right? But they won't question the way you write your resume. I don't think people would think that, oh, you did this on purpose, you're hiding something. No, you're not hiding anything. There's only one page, and there's only limited space. So you're putting the most relevant information, which is good. You just need to be able to explain that. And I think as a career switcher, you really just need to be upfront and honest and say, I'm a career, if they ask, just tell them I'm career switcher. And that's something we're going to talk about on Saturday, actually, because it feels like, I think, because I understand from a career switchers and job seekers perspective, you feel like the irrelevant work experience in the past is your disadvantage. But I think we need to turn that into our advantage, right? It depends on how you interpret that, because we can't really change our history. And the hiring manager actually also may come from a different job category. So people have gone through this, as well. So I think they'll appreciate that. But you just need to tell people that, yes, I'm a career switcher. I don't come from a data background. But look at what I've done, right? In a matter of 6 months. I can tell you that I'm truly passionate about this because I work on side projects, and there's the GitHub link here, and there's a blog post link here. And in 6 months, I was able to implement 2 really big projects, and you can see the architect diagram. It's pretty complex, right? And I've learned all of these skills in 6 months. And I'm putting a lot of effort, and I can learn really quick. This is the time you tell people you give people the proof. You prove that you can learn quickly, because they can see the tangible output, like the project, the diagrams, the recordings, whatever. And I tell people that I picked up everything in 6 months, and that's how good I am. Now you need to feel confident when you say this, and people will appreciate that. And I think it worked out for a lot of the students in the past, because I think interview is more about confidence. If you have that confidence, if this is the way you tell the story, people can feel it, and they will want to work with you. So yeah, definitely don't worry about it. I understand that maybe even if like we've done preparation with you and we told you that you should say it this way, but maybe the first interview you go to, you won't do very well. But I think over time you'll get more comfortable, and it takes some practice. But I think it will eventually work out. Yeah.
Got it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. Always tell people like how dedicated you are and how much you've done to get to this point. And people will see the potential, because I think if they're actually looking for a senior data engineer, then you won't even get an opportunity to have this interview, because they can tell based on the resume that you're not there. You're not that experienced. So the fact that you already have an interview means that they actually accept more junior level, talent. And you really just have to convince them that you can learn so quickly, and you have the proof. And you really like data engineering because of all of these things you've done. And I think that's quite convincing. And also, most importantly, you do have the skills they need, because there are not many people out there who have the Delta Lake and who the experience in Spark streaming stuff. And so if you can get the interview, you should be confident, because that means even as a career switcher, they want to give you an interview. You already impressed them. Now you just need to go to the interview and impress them more, and just tell them that I can definitely get this job. I can definitely get the work done, right? Yeah, we can talk more about this on Saturday when we go through the interview questions.